Well, good morning, church. It's good to see you guys. Let me just get something started here. Hold on one second. Awesome. All right. Well, it's a good morning. It's a good morning to have time with Jesus, isn't it? It's a good morning. So we've been talking about courage, right? We've been talking about take heart for the last several weeks. How many of you guys have enjoyed so far what Pastor Caleb, John, a bunch of other people have been preaching? Rachel was amazing. I love this idea of courage. I love what it does in our heart. So many of us don't even realize how many areas of our life, how many little areas of our life, it requires courage to live. You know what I mean? It requires courage to step out on who you are and to go after things in your life. And so it's been a really fun topic for the last several weeks. Let's do this. Let's just start with this verse, John 16:33. This has kind of been the theme verse. I want to throw that up here that we've been looking at. It says this. It says, "These things I've spoken to you so that in me you may have peace. In the world you have tribulation, but take courage," or be of good cheer. The different translations say, "I have overcome the world. These things I've spoken to you so that in me," where? In God, right? In me, and Jesus is talking here, "you may have peace. In the world you have tribulation, but take courage. I have overcome the world." Come on. That is so good. I love this idea of courage. This word here, it says, "but take courage." It's kind of the theme word. It's thesio, or don't quote me. It's not going to be saying it correctly right now this morning. I'm not a Greek scholar. But thesio, it's a powerful thing. It says it's this word that means to be of good cheer, but it speaks of your attitude, your perspective, what you're doing. Courage really does require that you take heart, that you step up. One of my favorite stories of courage, however, happens to be in the Old Testament with Joshua. If you guys have your Bibles with you this morning, I want you to open them up to Joshua chapter 1. I didn't put it on the slides because I think sometimes it's good just to look in your own Bible and follow along. If you didn't have one this morning, it's okay. I'll read you the story. You can just listen. Or you have it on your phone. You can always pull it up on a Bible app. That's always good. Let's just set the stage a little bit here. This is Joshua with the children of Israel. They're getting ready to go into the promised land. They're right there at the cusp. There's the River Jordan. They're on one side looking across, right, into the promised land. This is something that they've been traveling around for years with. They've been wandering around in the wilderness for 40 years looking for this moment. It's interesting when you begin to look at what situation they actually were in at the time. They've been in the wilderness, right, for 40 years, and they're getting ready to go into the promised land. This is the land that they've been looking forward. This is the land that God has promised them. They're getting ready to step into that. But oftentimes we don't realize what it was like in the wilderness. We look at the wilderness as this horrible place, this desert. It's the wilderness. Now, obviously, it's called the wilderness for a reason. But I want to show you guys a few things about the wilderness that was pretty spectacular. In the wilderness, they actually had some pretty incredible supernatural provision that was happening in their life. Did you know every morning they wake up to what? Fresh food right outside their door. They don't have to go anywhere. They just wake up, throw the covers off, the birds are chirping, right? You can hear the good morning song, and instead of waking up to Folgers in your cup, you wake up with a bowl full of manna. Do you know what I'm saying? You get up, you walk outside, collect that manna. Every day you wake up. And I'm sure the first couple times, this is what it said. It said, you're going to pick up fresh manna every day, right? Don't store it because it's going to go rotten, except for Friday, which is the day before the Sabbath, and that way you don't have to work on the Sabbath. Well, lo and behold, some of them were a little nervous that first couple days, and they found out the morning they'd wake up and there was rot in the manna. But they went outside and there's fresh manna. That's pretty amazing. Fresh food. In the evenings, birds would fly through and they could just reach up and grab some bird, have some roast chicken for dinner. Do you know what I'm saying? Every night. That's pretty amazing, you guys. When they needed water, water would come from a rock, right? Or somewhere else. Sometimes there was a spring that was poisoned and God turned it into sweet fresh water. Another time, Moses speaks to a rock. Another time, Moses hits it with his rod, right? Water comes flying out, provides enough water to serve, 1 million plus people. Pretty incredible. It says that their shoes never ran out. Oh, dear Lord. For the miracle of that. Do you know what I'm saying? I have 2 boys. Oh, Jesus, Lord. That shoes would never run out. Again, on Friday, my kid's getting ready for school. And he's like, Dad, there's something in my shoe. Pull it up, and there's like a big hole on the insole, or he's just like running. It's like, a week? That's all you get with new shoes is a week? You know what I'm saying? They should make some sort of shoe that mirrors these wilderness shoes that last forever. It says their clothes never wore out. Oh, Lord. I wonder if they like supernaturally grew with their bodies, as like the kids grew, or if they, I don't know. That would be awesome if that was the case, because as you can tell, my kids are in growing spurts right now, so it's a painful thing. No, so this is where they're at, though. This is the kind of supernatural provision they're walking in as a people. They're getting ready to step into the land of promise, the land flowing with milk and honey. But what you don't realize is when they step across that Jordan River, that provision stops. All of a sudden now in the morning, they have to go find food. They have to plant crops. They have to harvest those crops. They have to get some livestock. Then you got to watch the cattle, make sure wild animals don't destroy your cattle or your other livestock, your sheep, your goats, whatever else it happens to be. All of a sudden now you have to build houses and you have to build some sort of infrastructure. There's all of these things now that oftentimes we look for our promised land, right? Our land of promise, and we forget that it actually is a lot of work. In the promised land actually requires a lot of work. Not only were this season of supernatural provision was going to be coming to a close, but they were going to be stepping into a land full of giants and full of other people that they were going to have to deal with in possessing the promised land. So as a people, they're camped on one side of the Jordan River looking out, and they're like, oh my gosh. And then you have this guy, Joshua, who's been given the task to lead these people. Oh man. So what does he do? He goes up on a mountain and prays. You know what I'm saying? Like, dear God, help me. Get me away for a little bit, right? Listen, if you're in trial, go find a mountain, get on top of it and pray, all right? It's wisdom right there. But so the Lord meets them, right? And we're going to pick it up in verse 5, where in the middle, this is God actually talking to Joshua. It says this. It says, no one will be able to stand against you as long as you live. Oh, come on. That's a promise right there, right? I want that one. For I will be with you as I was with Moses. I will not fail you or abandon you. I will be with you as I was with Moses. Come on, just put your hand on your heart for just a second and just say, thank you, God, you're with me. Come on, this is a promise for us. Thank you, God, you are with us. You will not abandon us. You're not going to fail us. Oh, Lord, that's amazing. That's so encouraging. But right there he says, I won't fail you or abandon you. So, verse 6, be strong and courageous, for you are the one who will lead these people to possess all the land I swore to their ancestors I would give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the instructions Moses gave you. Do not deviate from them, either to the right or to the left. Then you will be successful in everything you do. Study this book of instruction continually. Meditate on it day and night so that you will be sure to obey everything written in it. You know, it takes courage to do what's right. It takes a ton of courage to do what's right. To take time to read your Bible, to know what's right and wrong. It takes courage to step out in that in the midst of peer pressure and what other people are looking and saying. But then it continues on. Only then will you prosper and succeed in all you do. This is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Come on. The promise that they have right now, be strong and courageous, is tied at the beginning and at the end to this promise that he will be with him. He will be with you. This is really, really huge. The promise, God isn't just saying, hey, be courageous. Have fun with that. He's like, no, listen, I'm going to be with you every step of the way. I'm going to walk with you so you can be strong and courageous. Know that I'm with you so that you can be strong and courageous. 3 times, God says, be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. 3 times. How many of you guys have gotten a prophetic word? You guys are like, yes, it's awesome, super encouraging. How many of you guys have gotten the same word more than once? Awesome. Okay, so I have to, right? Me and my wife, this week, we're having a conversation, and we're going through some stuff, and she's like, but God said this, he promised this. And the voice in the back of my mind kind of reminded me of something, a guy by the name of Chris Falladin. He's a pastor up in Redding. said, he was like, if you've gotten the same prophetic word more than once, it's probably because you're going to need to be reminded of it several times. I was like, my wife was like, I did not need to hear that. Like, what does that mean? We were having a good conversation. But it's interesting that this promise to be with you is connected to being courageous. Connection and courageous are side by side. Connection with God and courageousness. God didn't say, hey, you know what, Joshua, you need to buck up, be strong and courageous, have fun, go for it, and then watch him do it. He was like, no, listen, I'm going to be with you. If you're strong and courageous, you will overcome. I'm not going to leave you. I'm not going to abandon you, so be strong and courageous. And then sends him out. My son, when he was little, we used to do these memory verses. We'd turn like nursery rhymes into memory verses. I didn't. My wife did. She's amazing. But he had when he was 4, he probably had 10 or 6, 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there verses memorized in the little songs that we just sing before bedtime. Pretty awesome. I don't know them all. He does still. It's pretty awesome. But regardless, the point is he's 3.5, 4. We were in the midst of doing this at the time. And we had this one, 2 Timothy 1:7. And it says, let's see if I can remember the song. Oh, man, I did it first service. I couldn't remember. Hold on. Oh, yeah. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. 2 Timothy 1:7. So he would sing this, right? We had a bunch of different jingles, different songs, and we'd sing it before bedtime. So one time we're getting ready for bed. I'm brushing my teeth upstairs. His bedroom lights off and stuff. He comes into the bathroom, and he's like, Dad, he's almost 4. Dad, I know that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. 2 Timothy 1:7. But could you please turn on my light? I loved he had to sing the song, he couldn't just say it. It's pretty awesome. But he did, so I'm like, all right, of course, I'm going to turn on the light. It's interesting, though, that our life is actually similar to that. God's given us the charge to be courageous, to be fearless, but he also said, I'll be with you. Don't worry, I'm walking with you. This is why you can be courageous. It's like God is like the dad in that picture where he walks in, he's like, look at how brave my boy is as he flips on the bedroom light, like bragging to everyone. Look at how brave he is. Look at how brave he is as he flips on the light. That's what he's doing with you. You don't have to live in fear. You don't have to walk in those places because he's promised to be with you in the midst of it, through those situations. It's huge how much this connects. Let's jump back to the verse that we started with, John 16:33. And I want us to look at this again. This word for take heart or for courage, here it says, but take courage, and other translations says, be of good cheer. It's the word tharsio. In the New Testament, if you do a little search, it shows up 8 times. And every single one of those times, it's a situation where either Jesus or God is speaking to someone and telling them to have courage in the midst of discouraging circumstances. Every time. It's either Jesus telling the blind person, take heart, you're about to get healed. Do you know what I'm saying? He's telling the disciples in the midst of a storm, take heart, I'm about to stop the storm. Be courageous. Don't give up right now. Press on, press through. One, God is actually speaking to Paul. He's blinded, the whole encounter's happening, and he says, but Paul, take heart. Be courageous. I'm going to send someone who's going to bring an encounter for you. Your life is about to be changed. Take heart. Be courageous. What's interesting is all of these situations, the verb tense, it's not an invitation. It's not a suggestion. It's not God saying, listen, there's this thing I want to invite you into, this moment of courage. I want to encourage you to come along with me. No, it's not. It's actually a direct command for you to take courage. It says you have a choice to make. Make it. Take heart. Be courageous. It's interesting, if you jump back to that verse that we just said in 2 Timothy 1:7, God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but what spirit has he given us? Power, love, and a sound mind. That word is soundness of mind. It's actually self-control. You're not a victim. You're not at the mercy of your circumstances. God has made you powerful. He's given you tools to be effective in the world around you. And then he said, you know what? Use some self-control. Which means, hey, you actually have to do something about this. You're not at the mercy of the storm in your life anymore because he's with you. He is with you. So be strong and courageous. Now, obviously, that's super encouraging to hear. And right now, you're like, oh, awesome, preacher, Dustin, you're doing great. Amen. Right? You guys are saying that, right? Okay, good. All right. But in the situation, you're at home and you get that crazy bill that shows up in the mail, or a family member calls, or a relative calls, or something happens, a friend comes over and starts yelling at you, or your next door neighbor who knocks on your door and starts screaming at you for having music that's too loud when it wasn't too loud. There's just... Right? When those situations happen, what do you do? Do you know what I'm saying? In that moment, the little thing where I'm like, hey, it's your choice, just be courageous. You're like, yeah, that doesn't fly in the moment. Like, when you're in that situation, it's not so easy as just to be like, oh, the preacher said just to choose courage. Oh, I choose courage. Awesome. My life is better now. It doesn't really work like that, does it? So the question then is, where does courage come from? If you're supposed to take heart, if you're supposed to have courage in these circumstances and situations, how do you get there? Where does the courage come from in your life? I want to answer that for you this morning. It's interesting. In the verse, it says, I love this. Oh, man, my notes jumped around. These things I've spoken to you so that in me you may have peace. In me. Courage, if we look at courage, the root word for courage came from the Latin word cor, for heart. For heart. The original meaning of courage had little to do with heroics or great deeds of valor, right? Today, when you think of like somebody with courage, you think of somebody that like, a war hero, or someone that like stepped out and did something really intense and crazy. They overcame a lot of odds in their life. But courage originally had one of these meanings is to speak one's mind by telling all one's heart. To speak one's mind by telling all one's heart. Now, it's apparent to see how courage started there and ended up in a place where it was, acts of valor or heroicism, right? Heroics. Because if you are stepping out in what's in your heart, you're going to be doing some pretty heroic things, right? You're going to be walking out in courage. If you step out with what's in your heart and you actually put actions to what you are feeling or your belief system, it's going to be pretty courageous. It's going to require courage. Does that make sense? So you can see the history of how the word went there. But the reality is courage starts with vulnerability. Courage starts with revealing your heart. Courage starts with actually getting into a place where you're willing to risk being vulnerable. So I want to be vulnerable with you guys this morning. Is that okay? So I've been working out a lot. You guys know I do other, I work out in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and stuff like that. But I've been lifting a lot of weights lately. As you can tell, I'm getting pretty swole up here. So it's okay to be vulnerable with you guys. I just want to show off my muscles a little bit. Is that okay? So, oh, that feels good right there. Look at that. Oh, I'm all tore up. Pretty impressive, right? Oh, man, I worked hard for these. Listen, this is all natural. I did not use the juice. If you know what I'm saying. Steroids. I'm talking about steroids. This is all natural. So it took me a lot of hours to put this together. Do you know what I'm saying? Oh, man, this is the real me, right, John? Come here, come give me a hug. Oh, yeah. Doesn't that just comfortable? It feels like you're giving me a hug, right? Yeah. Yes. See, it requires vulnerability, right? I have to, take off my shirt, show you these grand muscles here. It's interesting that all of you are laughing right now, but I can guarantee every single one of us in this room have done the exact same thing in multiple areas of our lives. I was considering starting an Instagram account, my Fitsgram. Do you know what I'm saying? My Fitstagram. Take pictures of my diet and my obvious workout routine, because you guys are going to want to be a part of this, right? Maybe get some supplement deals. Start doing that road here. Get a little extra income. No, it's interesting though that because I think I need to be a certain way or I need to have something, that I build what I think people need to see or want to see. And then I pretend to be vulnerable. I pretend to be vulnerable. Maybe you're struggling with something and you call your pastor, or you say, hey, we need to talk. Or maybe someone comes up and says, hey, how's things going today? And you're like, pretty good. Yeah, pretty good. It was a little rough with the kids this morning. Kind of yelled at them a little bit, but we got through it. We apologized. We made it right. They're good. Everything's good. It's awesome. And you're constructing something that has the appearance of vulnerability, that has the appearance of openness, but it's not at all. Did you know God will not violate who you are? He won't violate you. He waits to be invited into vulnerability, into intimacy, into connectedness. Adam, where are you? Where are you, Adam? We were just together. Where did you go? Do you think God was like, come on, Adam, out from behind the banana tree. Let's talk. You don't think he knew what happened? He will not violate you as a person. He waits to be invited into connection, into intimacy. The very thing that you need in your life is through the door of vulnerability. It's through this very thin veil that masquerades itself in your life. It's crazy is I go up, I want a hug, I need to feel connection, and I don't feel anything. Not only that, it's painful. If my wife tried to give me a hug, I'd probably cut her with some of these sharp edges. This is 10. You know what I'm saying? You reach out for connection, and the very thing that you need in your heart, you've built a wall, and is actually keeping you from getting that thing. You try to either you masquerade as everything's okay, or you put out an image of yourself that you think people need to see or want to see, or the image that you want to be and not sure if you are. And so instead of just being you because that's who you are, you're acting or putting on a front of someone or something else. See, it's more than just being courageous in the moment. Courage starts with vulnerability. It starts from living from the heart. Because what happens is through vulnerability, you get connection. And through connection, you get peace and intimacy. And through that point, you can see from heaven's perspective. See, this thing in my life, I'm like, oh man, I got some muscles. Look at these beautiful muscles I constructed. You see my 6-pack, or it's actually an 8-pack. It's more than a 6-pack. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's legit, right? I mean, you come up and you're like, I'm not sure if those are real. I'm like, oh, they're real. Let me do some push-ups real quick. Let me show you. Or let me lift this thing here. Here we go. Let me show you how real these muscles are, right? All of a sudden, my life now becomes a mission to prove and to reinforce this thing that I've built. When you build a false front, you have to keep defending it. You have to keep reinforcing it. You have to keep, once the lie starts, you got to keep lying to keep going. See, what happens is in your quest for vulnerability, if you're not actually vulnerable, you're setting yourself up for more separation and distrust and disconnectedness, whatever the opposite of connectedness is, right? See, the very thing that is going on in my life, the very thing I need is actually if I can just pull this off. See, you're walking around with hurts, and it requires that you just are willing to take it off and reveal who you really are and show what's going on. And when you can do that, the hurts inside your life, the pain that's there is actually open to be touched by the love of God. The separation and the disconnect between you and your family and your spouse or your kids is through the veil of that vulnerability. The healing that your heart is longing for requires that you're vulnerable. See, vulnerability is just this interesting thing. Because on the one side of it, when you think about being vulnerable, it's super scary. You have to face the fears of rejection, of being made fun of not being taken seriously, of ridicule, of betrayal, of broken trust, of being hurt again and again. But it requires stepping through that to reach into a place of connection. Now, obviously, for a different time, a different message, you can't have real vulnerability without healthy boundaries in your life. And that's a different message. You actually requires, to be truly vulnerable, you have to be able to have healthy boundaries. I don't reveal everything in my life to every person. I have a couple people that I reveal everything to. Then I have some more people that I reveal most things to. Then I have another level of people that I reveal a lot of things to. And then I have another layer that I reveal some things to. Does that make sense? Yeah. Being able to say no and yes is required to be truly vulnerable. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm not going to just show up and talk to somebody and just tell them about all the things in my life, because I'm setting myself for hurt and for betrayal and stuff. Because why? Our relationship actually doesn't have the strength to handle what I'm about to reveal. Now that's the strength of boundaries. Is the relationship, the history I have with my wife can handle what I'm about to share with her. Does that make sense? But in this context, back to being vulnerable, if you can just kind of put what I'm saying through that grid, is that when someone comes to you in vulnerability, how many of you are like, yeah, you're ridiculous, none of us are like that? No. Do you know what I'm saying? When someone comes to you and is vulnerable, how many of you guys know? It's like your immediate response is like, it's okay, I'm sorry, come here, let me give you a hug. Like, it's okay, we're like I love you anyways. It's like there's something about our heart when it sees vulnerability, it like you want to reach out and connect. It draws you in. How many of you guys have had this? Like this, it's happened to me a few times, where you have like maybe a relational tension with somebody, or someone says something or does something, and you're like, who do they think they are? They're crazy, legitimately crazy, right? And you build up this thing of who they are and what it's going to be like. And when you talk to them, I'm going to say this, and they're going to say this, and then I'm going to be like this, and they're going to know how wrong they are, right? And then they're like, they text you and like, hey, bro, we need to talk. Or like if you're me, I'm like, hey, we need to talk. And I usually instigate confrontation. My apologies if you've been on the bad side of that. But just being vulnerable. No. But so what happens is you have the meeting, the person comes in, or you go to coffee, and you're ready. Oh, maybe even you have notes in your phone. You pulled it up, you're like, hold on 1 second. On February 2nd. No. And they look at you and they're like, before you can even say anything, they're like, hey, I have to tell you, I was so wrong when I did this. I don't know what happened. I don't know what overcame me. I had a rough morning. I was angry. I was scared. I this, I that. And they're vulnerable. It's like immediately, it just completely disarms you, huh? You're like, well, there went all my ammunition. Dang it. Give me a hug. Come here. Like, I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have been angry at you. And it's like, it reciprocates. He will be with you, so be courageous. He's going to be with you. This is important because vulnerability leads to trust and connectedness. And when you have that connectedness, it turns into peace. And that type of peace is our anchor in the storms of life. That type of peace is the one that at the beginning of John 16:13, where it says, I will be with you. My peace will be in me. You will have peace. So take heart. When you're vulnerable with God, there's a connection and an intimacy that forms and a trust that results from that. That trust is going to be the anchor in your life for when you face circumstances and situations. Out of trust, because of that intimacy, you can begin to now look at your situation and circumstances from His perspective. And let me tell you, your circumstances and situations look a whole lot different from His perspective than it does from yours. Or maybe it's not even about like hurt and brokenness or scary situations. Maybe it's about pursuing a dream. Maybe it's about overcoming an area of insecurity in your life, or stepping out in something that you really wanted to do or go after. You're like, what are people going to think if I do this, if I If I change my career path. And all of a sudden, through intimacy with the Father, you can see the situation from his perspective. And he's like, hey, I'm not promising it's all going to be perfect. There's tribulations in the world, but I'm going to be with you. So take heart. Take heart. Be willing to be seen for who you are. Be willing to be vulnerable. Because in that place of vulnerability is healing. In that place of vulnerability is where, could anyone touch my heart with this on? No. Most of you couldn't even see that there was a problem going on. The path to healing is vulnerability, which results in connection, which results in peace, which then turns itself back around into courage. And in courage, you step out in vulnerability, which results in connection, which results in peace, which results in courage. And you have the strength to step out further in vulnerability, which results in connection. See how this goes? God is inviting you into a place of trust with him that maybe you haven't quite seen or experienced yet. It requires to step out to see that thing healed in your life. As we're courageous in our vulnerability with the Father, we are able to be courageous in life. And as we live from the heart, we approach life not from timidity or fear, but from what has been put inside of us to be shown and shared with the world. You guys are a gift. Your life is a gift for the world. You have been placed where you're at to be a light, to be hope, to be life to people around you, to be carriers of peace in your workplace, in your family, in your friends. God's inviting you to be vulnerable so that it's not so that you can just be freaked out about being seen or whatever. It's actually so that who you are can come out and reach the world. People are waiting to actually see you, to encounter you. You were created in the image of God, not the false front that you've built to have people look at. Your Instagram account was not created in the image of God. Your Facebook profile was not created in the image of God. You were. When you are who you are, when you are who you were created to be, you step into a place where you are actually beginning to represent the image of God to the world around you. Can you imagine what it would be like for the Son of God to be stripped naked and crucified in front of all the world? He modeled vulnerability. He modeled how to be willing to be betrayed, to be stabbed by those closest to him. Greater love has no man than those that are willing to lay down their life. And it's not about like this self-deprecating love. It's not about this thing of like where you're just putting yourself in harmful situations and playing a victim. It's actually about being powerful in your vulnerability to say, this is who I am. And either stepping into being made whole and getting healing, or stepping into actually representing God to the world around you. There's so many situations and circumstances in our life that I feel like they fall into kind of like two big areas. The hurt, painful ones that God's inviting you into vulnerability this morning, or the dream ones where you're like, I'm not sure how to step out on this. This thing I've always wanted to be. I always wanted to do this. I was talking with the kids on a Wednesday night, and I was joking around about how for years I always wanted to wear skinny jeans. Now you guys are laughing, but the reality is how many of you guys have seen a style and you're like, I wish I could wear that. The reality is you really can, actually. I mean, some styles I've just, no, but I'm sorry. I shouldn't have gone down this road. I'm sorry. It's silly, but it's like There's a side of you that is waiting to come out, that is longing to come out. And it requires being vulnerable. It requires stepping through that place. It requires a phone call to a boss or a pastor and saying, hey, we need to talk about this. Reaching out for connection. Reaching out for vulnerability. You have to fight for it because the enemy doesn't want you there. He wants you to have these false fronts in your life because he knows if he can keep you from being real, he can keep you from being the gift to the world that you were created to be. See, you think the enemy wants you to be who you are? To be who you were created to be? No, he is fighting with everything, and it's not difficult for him. All he has to do is just, oh, you see that thing you're afraid of? It's actually way worse than it really is. All he has to do is get you enough to I'm going to be halfway vulnerable. And then you begin to construct a lie that then requires that you continually reinforce it. And reinforce it, reinforce it, reinforce it. It's interesting. I didn't mean to go down. I wasn't planning on going down this road. But if you go to where Jesus, right, he gets baptized and the Holy Spirit comes down on it like a dove. And then it says immediately the Lord brings him into the wilderness to be tempted. You guys know what I'm talking about? So he's fasting. He's in the wilderness for 40 days fasting. And it says Satan comes to him and tempts him. It says, if you're the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. It's interesting, in that moment, if Jesus had engaged in that battle of having to prove who he was, it would have revealed the fact that he didn't really believe who he was. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You just need to be you. You just need to be who God created you to be. I don't have to prove to anyone that I have big muscles. It doesn't matter. Do you know what I'm saying? Just have big muscles. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Just be strong. I don't have, it's you see the twist there? And all of a sudden you look at Jesus, his pattern there, and you see that right before he goes into the wilderness, the voice of the Father comes out and says, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. And then he steps out into the wilderness and the enemy begins to tempt him in that same area. He says, hey, are you really going to believe what God said about you? Let's just test it out. Just test it out. Test it out with me. It's not that big of a deal. All right, okay. The stones of bread, that was a silly one. Let's do this one. Let's go up to the top of this building. And you know that verse that says the angels have been given charge over you. No harm will come to you until it's time. Yeah, just all you have to do is just jump off of here. And you'll see that you're the Son of God. Because you'll be protected. And Jesus is like, I got you. I don't have to prove anything to anyone. Should a man tempt God? And there's this back and forth thing. I want to encourage you guys today. I honestly feel there's an invitation this morning for you to step into a place of courage in your life that you have yet to experience. A place where you can live fearless. You can live in a place where you're walking with that same spirit that he's given you, one of power, one of love, one of self-control, soundness of mind, where all of a sudden your life becomes a gift to the world. There are people that are in your life that only you will ever be able to reach with the gospel. Only you will ever be able to reach with hope and with life, with love, with acceptance, with care, with all of these things that we've been given to be. And it's not something that you have to prove. It's not something that you have to contend or strive for. It just requires being vulnerable. It requires stepping through that thing and being like, yeah, this is who I am. We're going to do this. If the band wants to go ahead and come on up, we're going to end, but I want to invite you guys this morning to a couple things. We talk about vulnerability. We talk about this thing. And like I said earlier this morning, God doesn't violate that place of vulnerability in your life. He doesn't force himself on anyone. There's some of these sometimes we read about, and there are times where there's a divine encounter where God just kind of shows up, and you're like, whoa, you're here. Oh my gosh, I love you. Ah! And, it has kind of like Paul and on the donkey and stuff. And we have moments like that. But the reality is most of the time God is standing there and saying, where did you go? Where are you at? I'm right here. That thing that you're crying out for is right here. But you have to open up for it. You have to be willing to be vulnerable to receive it. I'm not going to just force this on you. That's not love. It requires this place where we're willing to be exposed in front of God. It's interesting how many places like this connects to, even like in worship. How many of you guys have been in worship and you're like, I want to encounter Jesus, but you're like, I don't really want to lift my hands or dance, or the music is getting faster and now I just feel more anxiety because I don't want to move my body, I look awkward. But did you know through that veil of vulnerability, there's an encounter for you that you have yet to experience? I promise you. I guarantee it. You read what it looks like in heaven, and you actually see the elders around the throne, right? The song goes out, holy, holy, and the elders, the ones that are supposed to be mature, responsible, running the place, they're on their thrones. They hear the song, they dive off the thrones, they throw their crowns on the ground, and they lead the way of passionate, expressionate worship before God. Being vulnerable. Like, I don't care who's looking at me or who may think I need to look respectable right now. I'm here because God is this amazing and good. Do you know what I'm saying? See, there's so many little, like, different areas that there's an invitation to be vulnerable in. Oftentimes we associate that with sin. You know what I mean? Like, hey, you need to be vulnerable because you need to confess your sin. And that's true, but that really limits the power of what we're talking about this morning to one area. That's only one area of vulnerability that you're being invited into. I want you to stand with me this morning. What I want to do is we're going to go into a song of worship, and obviously we're going to invite you to come down and step up. I want to be really clear, though. Obviously, pretty much all of us can be like, hey, there's an area in my life that I need to be more vulnerable in. Do you know what I'm saying? However, I want to invite you down. If you are recognizing and realizing, man, there's some areas of my life that I have not exposed to God. I haven't been open. I'm nervous. Now, it could be a sin area. It could be an area that you're struggling with, a stronghold in your life that you need to see broken. But it could also be a dream that you're like, what it's going to look like if I actually admit that I want to be this, or I want to go after this. Maybe it's an area of insecurity or a thing that you're like, why do I need everybody to think that I'm really tough, or I've got a lot of muscles and I work out? Why does that matter? Or a style, or you know what I'm saying? Like, maybe something you're struggling with as a parent, or your marriage with your spouse, or relationships around you. Maybe there's something at work where you're like, I just wish that I could do this or be this. I want to invite you down to encounter God in a way this morning where you're vulnerable before Him. And coming out of that, there's going to be a place of trust and intimacy that can launch you with courage to live from the heart, to live from that place where you take heart.